Hi folks, FloridaMan here. Today I am presenting an after-action report from multiple perspectives, which I hope you'll find as interesting as you usually find me just presenting my perspective. The game was entitled Number 3, and I played as Italy. I will let you know when I'm presenting each person's point of view, but I'll start out with my own. Spring 1901. I establish friendly relations with Austria, and I establish a non-aggression agreement with France. At the same time, Germany contacts me about a so-called secret alliance against France. I'm sort of enthusiastic about the idea, so I immediately ask him if the secret alliance includes England. Germany says it does, but he and I have to start the attack first. I also contact England, and her response is a big meh. In my own mind, I resolve not to do anything against France at this point. I open a way that's very friendly to Austria. Unfortunately for Austria, he opened to Romania and didn't bounce Russia in Galicia, which is a very bad combination for purposes of not getting destroyed very early on. The French perspective.
Okay. Hi, this is Jordan. I'm doing an AAR for diplomacy game number 180175 on playdiplomacy.com. So in this game I was playing France. I've had some success with France before when I focused on building really strong fleets. So that was kind of the idea that I had going into this. So I started out in 1901 in spring, messaging England and Italy. I didn't talk to Germany much, but with England I said, hey, let's DMZ the English Channel. They agreed. With Italy, FloridaMan, I asked to DMZ Piedmont, and he agreed as well. Counting on both these people to hold to their agreements, I moved Brest to Mid-Atlantic, Paris to Gascony, and Marseille to Burgundy, thinking if either of my allies here didn't hold to their agreement, I would be able to quickly turn around. In the meantime, I hadn't really talked to Germany, so I was afraid Munich was going to come to Burgundy, so I wanted to block them off right away.
The Turkish perspective.
Hi, this is FloridaMan. This is my first diplomacy after action report for the game number 3. Which started as a live game on July 11th on standard map with classic rules, and I chose Turkey. In winter 1900, I quickly messaged Russia, Germany and Italy, asked Russia whether he'd like to try the Juggernaut. I haven't had much experience of playing Turkey, but I've previously been destroyed by Russian and Turkish alliances. Austria messaged to ask if I'd like to work with him to limit the Russian growth, and decided to work with him and suggested moves that I should play so we could split the Balkans, taking 2 supply centres each. In spring 1901, one of the most notable early events for me was the anonymous public press message that Austria is very highly ranked and be careful about taking advice from him, which really confused me into thinking who the message was from and what they were trying to achieve. Decided I wanted to work with Russia, but it did make me wary of trusting him. There looked to be quite a number of early agreements in place from the first moves between France and England in particular, and also Italy and Austria. Russia made an aggressive move opening to the south, and we bounced in the Black Sea as agreed. Germany put in illegal orders.
The English perspective.
Hello, hi, my name is Cheese News, aka England, and I'm going to be doing a rundown of my impressions of the game, kind of thoughts on everyone's moves, and details on the communications that were going on behind the scenes for a game called Game Number 3. So at the beginning, being England, I definitely want to be in close communications with both France and Germany to understand how are we dealing with the English Channel, is there potential to work together, how can we best strategize. So France and I start speaking immediately about agreeing to a DMZ with the English Channel, and we also discuss a further alliance beyond just that DMZ of the English Channel. And France seems to me like a pretty with it person, interested in strategizing and long-term planning, which is quite the stark contrast to Germany, who I also reach out to in the spirit of peace, wanting to get on the same page. Germany responds with quite the message that, quote, Belgium and Brest can be yours. Also, Portugal will be your influence. Also, Italy can join in participation. We stand together. Remember together, we smashed Napoleon once. We don't need another Napoleon. Whew, wow. I mean, the drama is high. So I thought, wow, okay, this person has a lot of thoughts about France and wanting to go against France. But I take it in stride. Italy also messages me to ask about a secret alliance against France, because I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that France had suggested a triple alliance with Germany. I had already reached out to Germany about peace. They responded with that really, aggressive message. So Italy and I touched base. Germany had also reached out to us to ask if we wanted to join together against France. But having a little bit of understanding of what Germany's all about, which seems to me like straight up warmongering, I don't assess them to be the most, how do we say, dependable strategic player. And I decide I'd rather cast my lot in this life with France rather than Germany, if I'm thinking about my allies as England. So I respond to Italy and I say, ultimately, given Germany's communications, I don't think I can rely on Germany, and I'm uneasy about joining any alliance that they're either leading or a part of. Italy and I agree to keep in touch and perhaps coordinate in the future. Austria also reaches out with warm intel. I respond in kind.
The Italian perspective. Fall 1901. My moves are as boring as usual for Italy. While Austria is stuck at 3 centers, Germany makes really bad misorders that prevent him from getting any builds, and with France not being challenged by England either, I'm starting to get nervous about the situation over there. The only fortunate thing from my perspective is that Turkey has moved to the Black Sea, which might mean that in the absence of a strong Austria, he's decided to challenge Russia. In the fall 1901 build phase, I see France has built 2 fleets, which is just a big headache. I now assume he's going after me. The French perspective.
I got super lucky. Both of my allies held to their agreements, which allowed me to secure 3 supply centers in fall 1901. I got Belgium, Spain, and Portugal. So I was able to build in Marseille, Brest, and Paris, as all 3 of those were unoccupied. And I built 2 fleets, because like I said, I wanted to have a strong naval force. Obviously, that has complicated implications because I was only able to succeed in getting these 6 units to start with because England held to their agreement and Italy held to their agreement. So I wasn't going to go attack England because they're my friend. And I wasn't going to go attack Italy because they're my friend. It doesn't make sense for me to go around England to attack Russia. Germany and I hadn't had any conflict at this point, and since they're mostly land-based, I wasn't going to attack them. So I figured I'd start moving my fleets into the Mediterranean, and I was hoping Italy and I could work together to take on Austria and Turkey.
The Turkish perspective.
Fall 1901. England made a good start against Russia. France gained 3 supply centres because of more illegal orders from Germany. Austria kindly supported me into Greece but lost Vienna to Russia. I was feeling very happy with my start, getting 2 supply centres and remaining on good terms with Austria and Russia. It was good to the Black Sea as well. Fall 1901 builds. Russia and France had the early lead with 3 builds each. I built a fleet in Constantinople and an army in Ankara. I was concerned that Russia might see this as aggressive. He asked why I didn't build a fleet, but I managed to convince him that I was still on his side. He was very concerned about a French and English alliance.
The English perspective.
By the end of the fall of 1901, I am aggressively targeting Russia, given that I'm already at peace with France and have tentative peace with Germany as well.
The Italian perspective. In spring 1902, I do try talking to France and asking him if he'll send his fleet north, and he says nope, he wants to have a nice, cozy little bit of insulation around France. Thus begins the madness of my dealings with France. He claims he can occupy some Mediterranean space without being hostile to me. I have no idea if he means it or not, but either way it's obviously trouble if I have to worry about tripping over French fleets. The French perspective.
So in 1902, I moved my fleets south, and Italy got really scared about that. They messaged me saying this is an aggressive move and stuff like that. And I was like, hey, Italy, I'm not coming for you. Please just let me pass. Together we can take Austria and Turkey. I'm not going to touch your home centers. I'm not going to touch Tunis. You can keep those. I have no interest in those. And I meant that. As far as I was concerned, we were friends. But I said, please don't get in the way. I'm just trying to pass through. They didn't believe me.
The Turkish perspective.
In spring 1902, Germany surrendered. I moved to Armenia and to Aegean, but no one else made much progress this turn.
The English perspective.
So moving into spring 1902, I get into position with a fleet in the Barents Sea, an army in Norway, and a fleet in Skagerrak and the North Sea, posturing aggressively against Russia. So at this point, interestingly, Germany surrenders. So France and I plan to divide and conquer their land. I mean, this is like a great development for me because I'm already going hard against Russia. France and I have a great relationship, and then our one ally, or the one country in the middle, Germany just surrendered. So France and I think we can go hard in capturing those German territories. So at this point, I get a message from Russia, and this is when what I've been calling the French panic really starts to set in. So Russia messages me, says we need to start working together or else we have problems elsewhere. I have troubles with Turkey, but if you don't do something about France, we have serious problems. And then I get another note that says, time to work together. France is getting very big and there is no Germany. Can we stop fighting amongst ourselves and address France? And then I get another message that says, you don't seem too concerned about France. Get ready to lose. And then, it's just an onslaught of messages saying, stop France. But I just don't understand why that was a strategy that was pursued, because clearly France and I are in an alliance. Like, how is that not apparent to all of the other players in the game? Like, why would I turn on my ally? But we're going to see how that happened.
The Italian perspective. Fall 1902, I move my units to defend against France, and he insists he wants to help me against whoever I want to fight. I tell him to please go away, and he refuses. Unfortunately, at the same time, Germany and Austria are basically being destroyed. At this rate, I'll be lucky if I don't get invaded by France through Tyrolia and Turkey through the Ionian at the same time. The French perspective.
So in fall 1902, they set up more defensive positions. They broke the Piedmont DMZ, which I was like, okay, that was our agreement not to go into Piedmont. So at that point, I was like, okay, I need to be a little more aggressive.
The Turkish perspective.
Fall 1902. This was a key turn for me. I always thought that stabbing two players at once was pretty foolhardy, but I saw the opportunity and I went for it. I realised that Russia couldn't protect both St. Petersburg and Sevastopol, so I made my attack on Sev. Destroyed his fleet as Austria bounced him in Romania. I struck up a good partnership with Austria, but by fall 1902 decided the stab was the best option. I attacked Austria and took Serbia. It was the hardest decision for me because I saw Austria as my key ally, but he was looking weak and distracted by his war with Russia, which meant he also lost Budapest. Austria took the stab graciously and said it was well executed. England took Sweden because Russia concentrated on taking Berlin.
The English perspective.
Just to wrap up, in 1902, I end up grabbing Sweden and Holland.
The Italian perspective. Spring 1903, France takes Piedmont, and Turkey takes the Ionian, while at the same time continuing to move against Russia. The Turk is ambitious, but I can't help but think that in a better game, with good players in France and Russia, he would not be doing as well. Russia wouldn't have wound up in this situation where he's attacking Austria while Turkey is attacking him, and if France wasn't banging his head against me, I would be attacking Turkey. In any case, I've resolved to give up my centers to Turkey, since it's him or France, and France has done everything in his power to ruin my game. Intentional or not. Meanwhile, England has moved into Belgium, supposedly bending to pressure from me and Russia to do something about France. The move is so small and non-committal, though, that I think both Russia and I assumed it was agreed upon. The French perspective.
So in spring 1903, I attacked Piedmont from Marseille with support from the Gulf. I set up to hold the Western Mediterranean, and I told Italy again, like, you broke our agreement. I just need you to get out of the way. You losing Piedmont doesn't actually lose you anything. Like, this is just to show you need to get out of the way. Like, you need to trust me. And they said, no, I don't trust you. Like, I'd be stupid to leave that open. Like, what kind of game are you playing? And I was like, okay. At this point, England also stole Belgium from me, which I was mad about. And I asked them why. And they said, well, I was tired of you not doing anything because of this standoff with Italy. So I was like, well, that's not really fair. I thought we were friends.
The Turkish perspective.
Spring 1903, a new Germany joined. I tried to gain favour with France by telling him that everyone else was communicating to stop him. I managed to take Romania off Russia. France began to make some progress against Italy, and France and Russia began fighting in Germany. Italy tried to warn me that France would win if I attacked him in Russia.
The English perspective.
So moving forward to 1903, by this point, I am really over all of the messages to turn on France. Like, I'm just sick of getting these annoying messages, frankly. So I try to get France to work with me on some calculated theater. And I tell them I'm moving into Holland, and I say this will help them as well as me, just to imply that it will help him if I behave aggressively towards him a bit. So by the fall, I suggest even more strategic headbutting to deter others from France's presumed future domination. Now, France responds to my suggestion of strategic headbutting, saying, quote, I'd rather not fake fight to make everyone else feel better, haha, end quote. Okay, so I've got Italy and Russia and Turkey, who is intermittently brought on or off the threads, breathing down my neck, telling me to turn against France. Like, messaging was constant. And then you have me saying to France, hey, look, like, folks are getting really upset about our alliance. Maybe it would help us both if we sort of appeared to not be so friendly. And France rejects me and says, no, I don't want a fake fight. So at this point, I feel like I have nothing left to do but to just actually turn on France a bit. And if they don't want to play games with me, then I will just take some of their territories, both to get Italy and Russia off my back, and to gain some more territories, because France has been left vulnerable to me because we had an alliance.
The Italian perspective. Fall 1903, Turkey takes Naples with no interference from me. At sea, I hold my own against France, although he does force his way into Tyrolia. The French perspective.
And then in fall 1903, England continued to backstab me, holding Belgium after I asked them to leave. And at this point, I was in Munich already, because Germany was getting just devoured by everyone. So as another show of good faith, I used Munich to support Piedmont to Tyrolia. Again, I could have tried to go for Venice if I wanted to. As far as the Mediterranean goes, I kept trying to push past Italy. They were not having it. They were just setting up a defensive line. And now Turkey was making their way into Italy.
The Turkish perspective.
In fall 1903, I took the opportunity to attack Italy and take Naples. That was fairly quiet for me, with my 6 other moves bouncing. That's where England took St. Petersburg while Russia took Norway. There's lots of anonymous shoutbox messages, and mainly targeted in France. But then Russia and France began to communicate messages on the shoutbox. Russia told me that though he saw Russia as the biggest threat in the game, I said it was France and Turkey versus the world. Italy said I must kill him, don't share the spoils with France. I trusted the opinion of Austria and asked his opinion of the board. He said they thought Russia stood to do best, particularly as England and France were at war. I definitely didn't expect to win at this stage.
The English perspective.
So, by the fall, I've taken Holland and Belgium without warning, effectively turning on France. And I've also managed to nab St. Petersburg, although Russia did take Norway from me at this point. I don't think that's a big deal, though, and I think I'll be able to chase them out of there. So in 1904, by the fall, the writing is on the wall. France sends me a message with the subject stabs, S-T-A-B-Z, And the message says, why though? Where did we go wrong? Well, I'll tell you where we went wrong, France. I told you I needed to make some moves against you. You didn't want to play along with me, so I had to actually stab you to get Italy and Russia to stop sending me these painfully annoying messages.
The Italian perspective. Spring 1904, Austria and I, having remained friendly throughout the game so far, perform a coordinated bounce in Trieste to protect it from Turkey, Russia, and France, who are all in spaces next to Trieste at this point. Meanwhile, Turkey seemingly prepares to slowly push more units into the Italian peninsula, which I suppose I will probably have to accept. The French perspective.
So at this point in fall 1903, I was talking to Turkey and I was like, look, the sooner we can get Italy out of the way, the sooner this thing can be done. And so in 1904, in spring, Turkey continued to make their way west, and I was just trying to hold the Western Med at that point because it was starting to become clear that I was having trouble with England. And so Italy was like, turn around, face England, go stop them. And I was like, well, I could do that. I should do that. But I didn't want to leave Spain wide open for Italy to swing into, or Marseille wide open. And really, I felt like if I could take Rome, and Turkey was saying they were going to help me take Rome, I could put some builds in Paris or Brest and hopefully fight off England. So I changed my mind after agreeing to leave and trying to convince Italy that there was still time for us to work together. I had agreed to leave, but last minute I changed my mind and decided I'm just going to finish this Italy thing and then I can focus on England.
The Turkish perspective.
In spring 1904, the term was mainly about me progressing my fleets through the Mediterranean.
The English perspective.
So moving on to 1905, I send a note to Turkey and, not Turkey. I send a note to Russia and Italy and I say, okay, folks, you all got the stab you wanted. France is no longer so much of a threat because I've taken 2 of their territories. Now what are we doing about Turkey? That is the real danger now. So at this point, Russia responds to me and says, France is not to be trusted. He said he would defend himself against you, but seriously wounded Italy. I'm doing my best to hold back Turkey. Quote, this has all been a quote, not clear that you really stabbed France. The fact that France didn't turn back suggests what you have done was all prearranged. Now, I personally find this hilarious because I did try to prearrange an attack on France so that they would be aware of what the moves were and we could sort of strategically roll that out. France refused me this coordination, so then I actually had to stab France, as evidenced by the message I got, say, with the subject stabs. But then here we are, now I'm trying to go back to Italy and Russia, and they're saying, no, we actually still don't believe that you have stabbed France. So that's where I'm at in 1905. I should also add that since I turned on France and have also been pretty successful in waging war against Russia, by this point I've taken St. Petersburg, all of the Nordics. I've taken Brest, Belgium, and Holland, and I've gotten a fleet into the mid-Atlantic. So thanks to Italy's help there. So I'm now looking pretty dominant on the map, although it seems Russia and Italy still do not believe that I have turned on France. Turkey also continues to grow. And oh yeah, I should have mentioned that Germany was totally destroyed, and I have no idea what's been going on with Austria, but they're pretty much dead too. Okay, so moving forward, just to conclude 1905, by this point, I told France that I had to turn on them, otherwise I couldn't get the others off my back, and I offered to coordinate further. So at this point, we have a really interesting turn in this relationship that although I did stab them, I was still open to working with them, given that my interactions with Italy and Russia were like pretty much just as unfruitful as I had expected from the get-go. At a certain point, I had said, enough of you two whining at me, like there was no strategy proposed. There was just an onslaught of messages to stop France. So in my continued conversation with France, we're sort of coordinating here. France, because I go back to France as like, I took some of your land, but do you still want to work together? And so France sort of gives me a story that sounds really similar to the story that Italy told me about how France stabbed Italy. And so France shares with me that they're working with Turkey and that they have been negotiating with Turkey and working together. And France says something that really irks me, which is Turkey and I may be working together, but that doesn't mean I need to stop you from attacking them. And to me, that's not acceptable. You're either with me and against Turkey, or you're with Turkey and against me, because it's very apparent at this point in the game that Turkey is the power to look out for. That Turkey is going to really take this whole thing unless we all do something to stop Turkey.
The Italian perspective. Fall 1904, I decide to stand Turkey out of Rome for now, to keep myself in existence a little longer, and see if some hope appears. But to my surprise, France supports Turkey into Romania, and Turkey supports France into the Tyrrhenian Sea. I retreat forward to North Africa, because my only real motivation for continuing this game is to prevent France from doing well, so I might as well have a unit closer to him to harass him. England is now fighting France, sort of, but she's unfortunately also still fighting Russia. I feel as if a peace agreement with Russia coupled with a focused attack on France would have been appropriate about a year or a year and a half earlier, but it's not like England and Russia are letting me write their orders. This game has become very disappointing for me, mainly because I've been unable to do anything meaningful diplomatically thus far, and it's not all France's fault. Certainly I've expressed that I am frustrated with France, and I expressed so very explicitly in my messages with him, and I really, really am frustrated with him. But it seems to me that almost everyone other than Turkey has been behaving in a really suboptimal way. The French perspective.
In fall 1904, I attacked the Tyrrhenian Sea with help from Turkey in Naples. I assisted Turkey into Tunis, but I lost Brest from England, which sucked a lot.
The Turkish perspective.
Fall 1904, it allowed me to take Tunis with France's support, and he also hit the other Italian fleet. I decided to reposition my armies and convoyed Armenia to Romania. France progressed further east, taking Venice. In fall 1904 build, there was builds for me, England and France, and Russia destroyed Denmark.
The English perspective.
So again, I had been saying we need to stop Turkey very early on, and had been met with a lot of whining and protests that France was really the issue here, and that I needed to do something specifically to stop France. But I found that once I actually did that, and I did make moves to limit France's expansion, the rest of the board, no one else really lined up to actually unite and go against Turkey. So I found that very frustrating when I had called out Turkey as the original threat here, that I was not, I don't know why I was so unsuccessful in convincing the other players to go with me against Turkey. So anyways, France says, hey, just because I'm working with Turkey doesn't mean I can't work with you. I really didn't like that, so I took that as, well, if you're not with me, if you're not against Turkey, then you are against me. And so I just took that as a sign that I just needed to go full bore against France, that any coordinating was pointless, and that I just needed to try and get as much territory as I possibly could.
The Italian perspective. Spring 1905, you see I'm slowly being killed, so not much to say there. The French perspective.
So finally, I had to kind of turn around. In spring 1905, Italy's North African fleet and my Western Mediterranean fleet and England's Brest fleet all bounced in mid-Atlantic. I had talked to England about leaving Brest, and then they were like, oh, I got bounced. I'm sorry, I really tried. But I knew that was going to happen. But at least I did claim Rome, but I had to sit there until
the Turkish perspective.
Spring 1905, the life phase had ended, and New Germany joined, and Austria proposed a draw with him, even though they only had one supply centre each. Italy asked me to help him against France. I said that I couldn't, and that he should work with England instead. Italy told me that England was telling everyone to stop me. A bit of a setback losing Romania to Russia, but took Budapest instead, bringing my armies into contact with France. Austria was still in the game somehow.
The Italian perspective. Fall 1905, I'm very much almost dead, but I move my last army out of Venice and into Piedmont anyway, even though it slightly increases the odds that I die immediately. To the last I grapple with thee. From hell's heart I stab at thee. For hate's sake I spit my last breath at thee. In the 1905 builds, France makes a mockery of my resolve by building Fleet Marseille, making my unlikely revenge look impossible. The French perspective.
Fall 1905, I see Italy's making a break for Marseille, of course, but now I have Rome, so I get to build in Marseille. I also decided to go, instead of Western Mediterranean to Mid-Atlantic, I decided to try for Spain. I was hoping that England and Italy would bounce each other, but instead Italy, with their dying breath, helped England into Mid-Atlantic. I figured if I just cover Spain, they can't keep taking it from me. Maybe not the wisest choice long term, but it held for now.
The Turkish perspective.
Fall 1905, I got Russia Romania back, but we lost Sevastopol, the fleet destroyed. I moved my fleet into position to finish off Austria, and at this stage England was looking very strong with 2 builds, and Russia having 2 destroyers.
The Italian perspective. Spring 1906, I nevertheless make attacking France in Marseille my very last move. I think I might have actually invited Austria into Venice, but I don't recall. In any case, because I die in the fall, having lost Venice, this is where my after-action report ends. The French perspective.
So by spring 1906, I was pretty well set up as far as Spain, Marseille go. Then I had to move Rome out of Tyrrhenian because I need to kind of fight back against England finally. I really should have brought those around the horn a long time ago.
The Turkish perspective.
In spring 1906, one of the really interesting things about the game at this point was the draw proposals. In spring 06, England proposed a draw for England, France and Turkey. I accepted because it seemed like a reasonable outcome given the position on the board, but France rejected it. Later, in fall 07, France proposed a 3-way draw, which England rejected. Anyway, I got Sevastopol back for destroying the Russian army. I took Trieste as Austria moved off to Venice. France was giving me suggestions of how he would best progress in the Med to block off England from progressing.
The French perspective.
So by fall 1906, I did make it to Mid-Atlantic Ocean with the help of Turkey, but I lost Portugal. So that sucks. At this point, Turkey and I are full-on allies, and Italy's basically out of the game. Within the next turn, they will be completely out of the game. And now I have to focus on fighting England. It sucks because I'm like a medium-sized power stuck between 2 really large powers. If England and Turkey wanted, they could just go ahead and draw the game right now. I don't know what Russia's been doing this whole time. They seem to have given up at one point. Back in fall 1904, they offered Vienna up willingly. I don't know what that was all about. So it's really a 3-player game at this point, and I really feel like I'm just the middleman. I'm going to get caught in the crossfire, so whatever. We'll see how it shakes out. But that's basically my explanation of how this went down.
The Turkish perspective.
In fall 1906, this is where it got really interesting, when Italy went out and proposed that we do the after-action report. Turkey and France quickly replied that we'd be happy to contribute, and England messaged all the other players to say, "Mission End France." He also messaged me to ask if we could also aim for a 2-way draw. I took Ukraine with French support and helped him to take the Middle Atlantic Ocean. I also took Venice from Austria. In the fall 1906 build, I had 3 builds and finally felt like a win was possible, although France and England were still both strong. I built 2 armies with plans to convoy them westward. Spring 1907, started writing notes for the AAR. I stabbed France, taking Vienna and Rome, which were left undefended. I then contacted France and England to talk about next steps. I was more inclined to work with England. We were talking well about going for a 2-way draw. I believed that if I worked with England, we'd be able to defeat France and take the 2-way. However, by now I had 15 supply centres and was also starting to think about the solo. France proposed a DMZ across from Piedmont to Prussia. He wanted me to move on England through Russia and to work together to move from the Med into the Atlantic. I didn't see that really working for me. I'd rather work with England to kill off France. They were engaged in a bitter war with France, having just taken 2 English supply centres and England won back from France. It could be an elaborate plot, but I didn't see it. My main fear was that they decided to work together. However, I could smell the solo now. The main issue being that England was supporting the 2 Russian armies, which meant I'd probably need to take Spain, Marseille and Munich. In fall 1907, as I mentioned earlier, France proposed a 3-way draw, which England rejected. England then proposed a 2-way for me and him, but France rejected it. England and I agreed to work together. We decided to leave the 2 Russian armies as a buffer. I've been messaging both England and France. I agreed to work with England and supported Gascony to Spain. I hadn't decided whether to pretend to accept France's proposal for the DMZ alliance. There didn't seem to be much point if I broke it immediately, and I was sure he didn't trust me much after the stab. After sleeping on the decision, I decided to take Galicia from France, which also positioned my armies for an attack on Russia. In fall 1907, I got 2 builds. France had 3 destroyers after being squashed between me and England, and there was now likely to be a 2-way draw between England and I, or one of us would push on for the solo. I was really worried that having supported England into Spain, that he now had the upper hand. In spring 1908, England began to show signs of not trusting me and asked me what my incentive was for working with him. I tried to persuade him that I just didn't want France in on the draw. I asked him to rotate his fleet so he could support me into Marseille, but he failed to do this. At this point, Italy messaged me to suggest that I was unlikely to solo and should back off a bit. But I took Ukraine from Russia and managed to also progress into Bohemia, while England took Berlin from Russia. England challenged why I broke the DMZ, but I think I convinced him that we were going to finish Russia and France off, and he asked for support to take Moscow. In fall 1908, I went for Moscow myself, but wasn't successful. France, by this point, had decided to let me take Marseille and Munich, because he was upset with England. I feel like I could have taken them easily myself anyway, but it probably allowed me to finish the game slightly earlier. And those gains took me to 18 supply centres, my 3rd ever solo win.
The Italian perspective. I think the lesson of this game from my perspective is that there's no changing people, so you have to adapt to the people you find in a given game. In the situation where I had this France who was saying some ridiculous and frankly outrageous things and clearly determined to move his entire navy through the Mediterranean, the only rational thing for me to do, if I could not get Germany or England to attack him with me, was to give in to French pressure and let him move units through the sea spaces around me. It's probable that would have turned into a French attack, but there's a chance that it might not have. And that chance was apparently the only opportunity I was going to get to do well in this game. C'est la vie. The French perspective.
Final thoughts. I think sometimes if a player like me has a lot of power to start with, you're probably better off teaming up with them rather than fighting them, Italy. I really meant it. Like, I was not going to attack you. I was going to move past you to stop Turkey. But I guess that's not typical of what most players do in this game. And obviously you've played a lot of games, but, you know, people might still surprise you. I really would be interested to know, like, what I could have done to convince you that I wasn't going to take your centers or Tunis. Especially because I was trying not to attack my first 2 allies, England and Italy. So, that's all.
The English perspective.
So I admittedly have written myself out much fewer notes for the endgame, and by much fewer I mean none, which is to say that basically once I decided to turn on France, they decided to behave in what I deem to be a pretty shady manner by their cooperation with Turkey. Russia and Italy continued to hammer me on the threat of France, which I really just did not understand. Like, it was very clear that Turkey was the real threat. I just figured, all right, I am going to attack France as much as I can in order to gain territories. Turkey was not a threat to my land personally. I also never really stopped attacking Russia. That's both because Russia was the one to send me the most annoying messages, and also that was, you know, where I had already been conquering lands. I had a foothold there, and by the end, I really was just interested in ending the game, and my primary goal was just ensuring that France didn't win. I really can't tell you exactly why I turned so passionately against France, considering we had an alliance from the get-go. But I had also been warming up to Italy quite a bit, and I thought they were a very strategic player, maybe put their eggs in the wrong basket, but they were also helping me to make moves against France. So obviously if I had a mutual enemy, it was beneficial for me to work with Italy to continue gobbling up the SCs that I could. Ultimately, Turkey and I ended up having some discussions towards the end about how we're playing a DMZ within Russia. Do we leave Russian territory alone? But yeah, much to the cries of the others, Turkey did end up running away with the win, part and parcel because they and I coordinated on some strategic SCs. Of course, they were super close to winning already, but in my eyes, I thought it would be justice for Turkey, who I had deemed the original threat in this game, to run away with it. So thanks for listening. Sorry I'm so long-winded, and I hope this informs you on some of the goings-on behind the scenes of this game. I want to add one thing, which is that Russia's messages really got to me. They first sent me a subject titled France. That was all about attacking France. Time to work together. France is getting very big and there is no Germany. Can we stop fighting amongst each other, amongst ourselves, and address France? They sent me another message with the subject, "You don't seem too concerned about France." And then the last favorite subject was "Stop the solo," which of course, I had warned against Turkey winning a long time ago. And so all of these messages had only one piece of information, which is stop the person that looks like they're going to win from winning. But there was no details on how they propose we do that. And so I love working with players who have strategy in mind, who have a game plan, who want to work together and think about what are the different possibilities here and how do we actually team up to not just stop someone from winning, but how do we increase our gain ourselves? And the fact that these components, both strategy and also like your own game, were wholly absent from all of Russia's messages. And that just really broke my spirit and made me not want to work with Russia whatsoever. So I wanted to add that as just an aside to people I love to work with, have both strategy in mind and complementary mutual goals in mind. The goal for me when I'm playing is not just stop the person in the lead, it's also how do I get into the lead myself, or how do I get me and my ally into the lead. So I hope that was also informative, and thanks again.
I hope you've enjoyed this after action report. Please comment below if you have any questions or requests, comments, thoughts, and if you liked this video, I hope you'll like and subscribe. Until next time, FloridaMan out.